Before the story begins, let your breathing soften like slow waves touching a distant shore. The day can stay outside the door for a while. Nothing needs solving now. Imagine a gentle lamp glowing beside your bed, its light warm and patient, guarding the quiet space where dreams are born. In that calm, the city of Ozymandias will slowly open its gates to you. Before the story begins, let your breathing soften like slow waves touching a distant shore. The day can stay outside the door for a while. Nothing needs solving now. Imagine a gentle lamp glowing beside your bed, its light warm and patient, guarding the quiet space where dreams are born. In that calm, the city of Ozymandias will slowly open its gates to you. In the sprawling, monolithic city of Ozymandias, reality was not defined by what you could touch, see, or smell. Reality was defined by the map. The Carterium stood at the city's heart, a colossal structure of black basalt that dwarfed even the imperial palace. It was windowless, silent, and smelled eternally of iron gall ink, cured vellum, and the coppery tang of dried blood. Inside, thousands of scribes hunched over drafting tables that stretched for miles under the cold glow of alchemical lamps. Their quill scratches were the only sound a million tiny claws reshaping the world. Alara was a level 4 ink grinder, the lowest caste in the Carterium hierarchy. Her hands were permanently stained a deep indigo up to her elbows. Her job was to crush the rare, calcified beetles imported from the shimmering southern deserts and mix their dust with the harsh chemical mordants that made the imperial ink permanent. Permanence is order, head cartographer Vance would intone from his high pulpit, his voice dry as old parchment. If it is not inscribed upon the Magna Terrarum, it does not exist. The void waits outside the margins, hungry for chaos. The Magna Terrarum, the great map of the world. It occupied the immense central rotunda of the building, a floor map 300 feet across, constantly being updated, erased, and redrawn by the elite high scribes. Alara hated the map. She hated it because it was a lie. The Empire taught that outside its borders lay only the unrendered, a swirling gray void of non-existence where physics dissolved and monsters dwelled. But Alara knew better. She belonged to the Whispering Folk, a culture whose lands had been redacted a century ago. The Empire had wanted their coastline for a new naval base, so the cartographers simply erased their homeland, Somnium, from the Magna Terrarum. Within a week, a metaphysical fog had rolled in, swallowing their villages, their history, and their reality. Those who escaped to Ozymandias became refugees in a world that officially refused to acknowledge they had ever come from anywhere. Every day, Alara ground the ink that maintained this lie. Every day, she washed the indigo stains from her arms, but the stain on her soul grew deeper. Careful with the pestle, girl, snapped Overseer Rosk, a man whose skin seemed made of crumpled paper. That is cerulean beetle chitin, worth more than your entire lineage. Yes, Overseer, Alara murmured, keeping her eyes down. The vivid blue dust sparkled in the mortar. It was the exact color of the ocean off the coast of Somnium, an ocean she had never seen, but remembered perfectly from her grandfather's stories. That evening, the great bell tolled the end of the shift. The scribes filed out like clockwork automatons. Alara slipped away from the main procession, heading not toward the dormitories, but toward the margin slums, the precarious shanty town built clinging to the massive outer walls of the Carterium, inhabited by those the Empire deemed unworthy of mapping. Their home was a single room patched together from discarded map crates and waterproof tarp. It smelled of damp wood and the slow, sweet decay of old age. Her grandfather, Silas, lay on a cot in the corner. He was the last living memory keeper of the Whispering Folk, but the Empire's reality was corrosive. If you weren't on the map, the world actively tried to forget you. Silas was fading, not just dying in the biological sense, but literally becoming translucent. The tips of his fingers were already hazy, like smoke caught in a draft. When he spoke, his voice sometimes lagged behind the movement of his lips, as if the universe was struggling to render him in real time. "Alara, little bird," Silas rasped. His eyes, once the color of a stormy sea, were cloudy gray cataracts. "I'm here, Papa Silas," Alara said, kneeling beside him. She brought him a bowl of broth bought with her day's wages, but he pushed it away weakly. "No time for soup," he whispered. "The fog is close today. I hear the waves of the unrendered crashing inside my skull." He gripped her hand. His touch was terrifyingly insubstantial, like holding a handful of dry leaves. "You must do it tonight. I cannot hold the anchor much longer." Alara's stomach clenched. They had been planning this for years, ever since she secured the low-list job in the Carterium. "Are you sure the calculations are correct?" she asked, her voice trembling. Silas tapped his temple. "It is not a calculation of mathematics, child. It is a triangulation of memory. I have held the coastline in my mind for 80 years. Every cove, every cliff, every scent of the jasmine winds. It is all here." He reached under his thin mattress and pulled out a bundle wrapped in oilskin. With shaking, smoky hands, he unwrapped it to reveal 2 items that would have meant instant execution if discovered by the Carterium guards. The first was a pen, not a standard quill, but a stylus carved from the shinbone of a sea drake, a creature the Empire claimed was mythological because they couldn't figure out how to draw its shifting scales on a 2D surface. The second was a small obsidian vial stoppered with wax. "The sanguine ink," Silas breathed. "My grandfather's blood mixed with the soil of somnium before the fog took it. It doesn't just record reality, Alara, it demands it." Alara took the items. They felt hot to the touch, buzzing with a dormant, furious energy. "The Magna Terrarum is guarded by the Ink Wardens," Alara argued feebly, though she knew it was useless. "They are constructs of pure bureaucratic rage. They don't sleep. They guard against intruders of flesh," Silas said, his voice growing painfully thin, almost a whistle of air. "But you are of the Whispering Folk. You know how to move between the noises. You must go to the Apex Chamber tonight. You must redraw our home before the last memory dies with me." He looked at her, and for a horrifying moment, Alara could see the wall behind him through his chest. "If I fail?" she asked. "Then we become what they say we are," Silas whispered. "Unrendered fiction." The Carterium at night was a different beast entirely. It was a cathedral to silence, vast and terrifying. The alchemical lamps were dimmed to a low, pulsating amber ember, casting long, stretching shadows that seemed to grab at Alara's ankles. She moved through the service fence, navigating by the blueprint she had painstakingly memorized over 3 years of dusting the archives. The air in the vents was thick with the metallic taste of concentrated ink fumes, a scent that could cause hallucinations if breathed too deeply. Below her, through brass grates, she saw the levels she was bypassing. Level 3, topographical correction, where hills were flattened on paper and then, days later, flattened in reality by imperial engineers. Level 2, political boundaries, where wars were decided by the stroke of a red pen. And finally, the rotunda, the heart of the machine. She dropped down from a maintenance hatch, hidden behind a tapestry depicting the emperor ordering the sun to rise. She landed silently on the marble balcony overlooking the Magna Terrarum. It was breathtaking in its horrifying grandeur. The map was alive. The oceans on the floor shimmered with actual moisture. The tiny mountain ranges were rough ridges of built-up pigment. Miniature clockwork cities ticked away where Ozymandias stood. And patrolling the perimeter of this grand design were the ink wardens. They were 7 feet tall, humanoid shapes roughly coalesced from spilled, semi-coagulated black ink. They had no faces, only smooth, reflective obsidian helmets. They didn't walk. They flowed, sliding across the marble floor with a wet, sickening sound, carrying staves tipped with blades that severed a person's connection to the physical world. Alara pressed herself against the cold stone of the balcony railing. The whispering folk had an old technique called the stillness. It wasn't invisibility. It was the art of being unnoticed, of becoming as irrelevant to the observer as a speck of dust on a lens. She breathed out, slowing her heart rate until it barely registered. She thought of herself not as a person, but as a margin note, something easily ignored. Below, 2 wardens slid past each other, their featureless heads rotating 360 degrees. They paused directly beneath her balcony. One of them tilted its head up. It didn't have eyes, but Alara felt its attention, a cold, damp pressure against her mind. It was searching for anomalies in the established order. She held the stillness. She became nothing. After an agonizing minute, the warden flowed onward. Alara vaulted over the railing, landing silently on the peripheral ocean of the great map. The blue ink was slick under her boots. She began to run across the world. She ran over continents and crossed painted deserts. She hurdled the miniature clockwork capital city, heading for the southwestern edge of the map, a vast empty expanse of blank beige parchment labeled Hic sunt nihil, here is nothing. This was where Somnium used to be. When she reached the edge of the known world, she stopped. The blank parchment ahead felt cold, radiating the chill of the void. She knelt on the boundary line between existence and non-existence. Her hands shaking uncontrollably, she unstoppered the obsidian vial. The smell hit her instantly, not iron and chemicals, but salt spray, blooming night flowers, and ancient, rich earth. It smelled like home. She dipped the bone stylus into the sanguine ink. For Silas, she whispered to the silence. She touched the pen to the map. The moment the bone stylus made contact with the magnetorum, a shockwave blasted through the rotunda. It wasn't a sound, but a psychic scream. The map itself recoiled. The floor beneath her buckled, the parchment groaning like a living thing being flayed. Alara cried out as heat seared through her hand up to her shoulder. The sanguine ink didn't just sit on the surface. It burned its way into the reality of the map. Warning. Unauthorized revision detected. The voice echoed from everywhere. A mechanical boom. Reality breach in Sector Southwest. The Ink Wardens stopped their patrols instantly. 7 of them turned in unison, their faceless helmets focusing on the small figure kneeling at the edge of the world. They let out a collective shriek and flowed toward her like tidal waves of tar. "Draw, Alara, draw," she screamed at herself. She squeezed her eyes shut, accessing the memory Silas had transplanted into her over a lifetime of stories. The Bay of Crescent Moons. She remembered the curve of the white sand and drove the pen into the parchment. The ink sizzled, steam rising red and pungent. Where she drew, the beige emptiness convulsed and turned a vibrant, living turquoise. The pain was blinding. With every line she drew, she felt a piece of herself being ripped away. Drawing reality wasn't free. A jagged line for the whispering cliffs. A memory surfaced, her first day at the carterium, the pride she felt at getting a job. The memory shattered like glass and vanished. She didn't just forget it. It was unwritten from her timeline. 3 dots for the Triad Islands. Another memory. The taste of the sweet bun Silas bought her for her 10th birthday. Gone. A hollow space was carved out in her heart. The Wardens were close now, the wet, slick sound of their approach deafening. The first one reached her, raising its staff to erase her from existence. Alara didn't look up. She was weeping now, drawing the inland forests and intricate river systems. The river of dreams. The memory of her mother's face dissolved completely. Alara sobbed, a guttural sound of absolute loss. She no longer knew what her mother looked like. The warden swung its staff. It should have turned her to dust, but the blade hit an invisible barrier just inches from her skin. The sanguine ink was protecting its creator. The warden recoiled, its ink body boiling. But there were more of them. They surrounded her bubble of reality, hammering against it. The barrier flickered. Alara was fading, turning translucent like Silas. She looked at her hand holding the pen. She could see the veins and bones glowing with internal red light. Just the capital city, the spire of song, she gasped. It was the hardest thing to draw, requiring the heaviest memory. She remembered Silas, the strong grandfather who carried her on his shoulders, who taught her the names of the stars. To draw the city, she had to sacrifice her memory of him. She would save him by forgetting him. "I love you, Papa," she whispered, the words already feeling alien in her mouth. She plunged the pen into the center of the new coastline and drew the intricate spiral of the city. The memory tore out of her mind with the violence of a physical amputation. She screamed, a sound that merged with the roaring of the map. The final line connected. The circuit was complete. The vial of blood ink exploded. A blinding flash of crimson light annihilated the rotunda. The ink wardens evaporated into steam. And then silence. The next morning, the sun rose over Ozymandias, but the light was different. It smelled of salt. Chaos reigned in the carterium. The high scribes ran in circles, terrified. Overnight, a massive new landmass had appeared on the Magna Terrarum. It wasn't just a drawing. The sensors indicated that a subcontinent had physically manifested in the southwestern ocean, displacing millions of tons of water. Tsunamis were currently battering the Imperial coast. Imperial ships were already being dispatched to investigate this geographical anomaly. In the margin slums, a miracle had occurred. Silas sat up in his cot, but transparency was gone. His skin was solid, flushed with life, warm to the touch. His eyes were a clear, piercing sea blue again. He breathed in deeply, the rattle in his chest replaced by strength. "Alara," he called out, joy bursting in his chest. "Alara, you did it. I can hear the song spire." He looked around the small shack. It was empty. He ran outside. The slums were bustling, everyone talking about the strange new wind coming from the southwest. Silas searched for 3 days, the markets, the docks, the Carterian perimeter. No one had seen a girl named Alara. On the 4th day, he bribed a sanitation worker to let him into the Carterium's waste tunnels. Desperate to find any trace of her, he didn't find her body. But in the great rotunda, hidden in the shadows of the balcony, he found something else. The Magna Terrarum had been repaired, though the scribes were still arguing over how to categorize the new land. Silas looked down at the map, at the beautiful coastline of Somnium gleaming in turquoise and green ink. And there, right where the bone stylus had first touched the parchment, at the Bay of Crescent Moons, there was a stain. It wasn't ink. It was a faint, human-shaped shadow burned into the vellum. A silhouette of a girl kneeling, forever caught in the act of creation. The Empire tried to scrub it off. They used their strongest solvents, their most potent erasures. But the shadow remained. Silas stood on the balcony and wept for the granddaughter he remembered perfectly, the girl who had traded her existence for his reality. He returned to the restored land of Somnium on the first ship. He lived in the spire of song, which sang with the wind, just as he remembered. He lived a long, full life in the home she had bought for him with her blood and memory. But every night, he would walk down to the Bay of Crescent Moons. He would sit on the white sand and look at the horizon where the sea met the sky. He knew that Alara wasn't dead. Death was too simple for what she had done. She hadn't become unrendered. She had become something else. She had become the ink. She had become the geography. She was the coastline itself, forever holding back the void, forever remembering the shape of home so that others could live within it. And sometimes, when the tide came in just right, washing over the white sands, Silas swore he could hear a whisper in the foam. A young woman's voice saying a name she no longer recognized, but loved all the same. And now the story loosens its gentle grip on you. The city fades, the sea grows quiet, and the map of all things slowly folds itself away. Whatever burdens you carried today may rest beside the shore of dreams, like small boats tied safely to a wooden pier. Let your thoughts become lighter than ink on water. You do not need to solve anything tonight. The world will keep its shape without your hands holding it. Like Alara becoming the coastline, you too can dissolve softly into the night and still remain whole. Listen only to your breathing now. Each inhale draws you closer to calm. Each exhale carries the day away. The tide of sleep is rising, warm and patient, ready to carry you to a place where no maps are needed, where every heart is already home.